Money is a mirror of behavior, not a metaphor, not a motivational phrase, a literal daily reflection of every habit, impulse, and emotional decision quietly running beneath the surface of your financial life. And the uncomfortable part? Most people never look directly at that reflection. They look at the number instead, the balance, the salary, the debt, and they keep waiting for the number to change without ever examining the behavior that created it. Hello book lovers, welcome to BOOKZEAL. Here's what nobody tells you. The same patterns that are shaping your financial life right now have been shaping it for years, quietly, automatically. In decisions so small and so fast, they barely felt like decisions at all. And if you've ever wondered why knowing what to do never quite translates into actually doing it, the answer is not discipline. It's not income. It's something deeper, something most financial conversations never reach. What you're about to hear will make you look at your own habits very differently, but only if you stay until the end. So, let's begin.
Most people think their money problem is a money problem. Like, if they just made a little more, maybe another $500 a month, maybe a promotion, maybe that one side thing finally took off, everything would sort itself out. And that belief is so convincing, so clean, so easy to hold on to. Because it puts the problem out there in the economy, in the job market, in bad timing, in someone else's decision that affected your paycheck, not in here, not in the habits, not in the choices that happen so fast, so automatically that they barely even feel like choices. But here's the quiet part nobody really wants to sit with. Most financial problems are not income problems. They are behavior problems wearing income problems as a disguise. Think about the people you know who got a raise and somehow found themselves just as tight 3 months later. Or the ones who got a windfall, a tax return, an inheritance, a bonus, and couldn't quite explain where it went. Not because they were careless, not because they were irresponsible in any obvious dramatic way, but because the behavior didn't change. Because the same invisible patterns that shaped every previous financial outcome were still quietly running in the background. Money doesn't lie. That's the uncomfortable thing about it. You can be charming, you can be intelligent, you can tell a very convincing story about your situation, and your bank statement will still tell a different one, not cruelly, not as punishment, just as a reflection. Your financial life is not random, even when it feels chaotic, even when it feels like things just happen to you. There is almost always a behavioral pattern underneath it. The way you respond to discomfort, the way you treat convenience, the way you handle a decision when you're tired or stressed or quietly rewarding yourself for a hard week. Those aren't isolated moments. They repeat. Quietly, consistently, predictably. Spending, saving, avoiding, delaying. These aren't random moods. They are loops. Grooves in the road you've been driving so long, you stopped noticing the road itself. The same mind that struggles with impulse control in small daily things, the extra order, the unnecessary subscription, the "I'll figure it out later," is the same mind navigating every larger financial decision too. It's all connected. It's all the same person, in the same patterns. And the strangest, most quietly devastating part? It compounds. Not just money, behavior compounds. The small, almost invisible choices, the convenience purchase, the skipped budget moment, the vague, uncomfortable feeling you decided not to look at directly, these don't stay small. They layer, slowly, the way water shapes stone, not dramatically, not all at once, just consistently over time without announcing what's happening. 2 people, same city, same income, same job title even, 10 years later, completely different financial lives. And most people will look at that gap and see luck or opportunity or some external variable that made the difference. They rarely see the 10,000 tiny behavioral moments that quietly separated those 2 lives. And here is the part that makes this genuinely hard. Intelligence doesn't close that gap. Education doesn't close that gap. Some of the most analytically sharp, professionally accomplished, deeply informed people carry a quiet, private financial anxiety that they've learned to dress up well. Because knowing what to do and consistently doing it are not the same skill. They're not even in the same neighborhood. Knowing requires information. Doing requires something else: patience, emotional steadiness, the ability to sit with discomfort without immediately solving it with your wallet, the willingness to let time work when everything in you wants to act. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most financial lives quietly unravel, not in ignorance, in the space between understanding something clearly and still not quite changing. Which means, and this takes a moment to actually land, if money is a mirror, then what it's reflecting isn't your income. It's your patterns, your relationship with discomfort, your time horizon, the emotional logic you follow when no one's watching and the decision feels too small to matter. Changing the reflection doesn't start with earning more. It starts somewhere quieter, somewhere less obvious, somewhere most people never think to look because they're still convinced the problem is out there. And honestly, that conviction is comfortable. It's almost protective.
Because the moment you accept that the mirror is showing you back to yourself, everything gets a little harder to ignore. Not harder in a punishing way. Harder in the way that clarity is always a little uncomfortable before it becomes useful. So let's stay with that mirror for just a moment. Because what it reflects isn't one big thing. It's not a single dramatic flaw or a defining mistake. What it reflects is texture. The small, recurring, almost forgettable texture of how you actually move through your financial life. Not how you intend to, not how you describe it to someone asking, but how you actually do it, quietly, when the day is long and the decision is minor and nobody is keeping score. There's a version of you that knows what a budget looks like, has probably made one at some point, maybe even followed it for a few weeks with genuine enthusiasm. The kind that feels like turning over a new leaf in early January, fresh and organized and almost enjoyable. And then something happened. Not a catastrophe, something small. A stressful Thursday, a celebration that deserved acknowledging, a thing that was on sale that made the timing feel almost responsible. And the budget didn't shatter dramatically, it just softened, quietly, without a clear moment you could point to later. That's the pattern, not the failure, the softening, the slow, almost imperceptible drift from intention back to instinct. And instinct, when it comes to money, is almost always shaped by something older than logic, older than financial advice, older sometimes than memory itself. The way money moved in the house you grew up in, whether it was talked about openly or in hushed, tense fragments, whether abundance felt safe or temporary, whether spending felt like living or like leaking something precious away. You didn't choose those templates. They were handed to you before you had any say in the matter. And then, somewhere along the way, they became the water you swim in. Invisible, constant, and completely shaping the direction you move without you ever deciding to swim that way. Which is why two people can read the exact same financial advice, feel equally motivated, and walk away making completely different decisions by Tuesday. Because the advice lands on top of the pattern. But the pattern runs deeper. It runs in the moment just before the decision. That quiet, half-second space where logic and emotion briefly meet. And one of them almost always wins without announcing it. For some people, that space is wide enough to pause in. Wide enough to let reason catch up. For others, and honestly, for most people in most moments, the decision has already been made before the thinking even starts. That's not weakness. That's not a character flaw. That's just how deeply behavioral grooves actually run. The mind is efficient. It does not want to reevaluate everything from scratch every time. So it reaches for the familiar pattern, the one that's been reinforced 100 times before. Because familiar feels safe, even when it isn't working. And so the loop continues, not because the person doesn't know better, not because they don't care, but because knowing and caring live in one part of the mind and the automatic, instinctive, pattern-driven part lives somewhere quieter, faster, and almost entirely out of reach. Almost. Because here's what's true about patterns, even the deeply grooved ones, they weren't always there.
They were built, slowly, quietly, one repeated response at a time. And anything that was built, even if it was built so long ago you can't remember the construction, can be understood, can be looked at directly, can, with enough honesty and enough patience, be rebuilt into something that actually serves you. But that work, that real, unglamorous, deeply personal work, doesn't start with a spreadsheet. It doesn't start with an app or a system or a 5-step plan someone organized neatly into a list. It starts with a moment of genuine noticing, not judgment, just noticing. The kind of noticing where you catch yourself mid-decision, standing in a store or clicking through a checkout or avoiding an email from your bank for the 3rd day in a row. And instead of just moving forward on autopilot, something in you quietly pauses and asks, "Why am I doing this right now?" Not accusingly, not with shame spiraling beneath the question, just why? What is this actually about? What am I feeling in the 2 seconds before this decision that I've been too busy to name? Because most financial behavior isn't really about money. It's about something money has agreed to stand in for. Comfort, control, relief. The quiet, private reward at the end of a day that asked too much. The feeling of agency when everything else feels decided by someone else. The soft, temporary lift of acquiring something new when the inside of life feels a little stale and a little stuck. Money is just the tool. The emotion is the driver, and the emotion, left unnamed, left unexamined, left running silently beneath every transaction, will always find a way to express itself, one way or another, in one purchase or another, in one avoidance or another. There's a kind of person, and maybe you know this person, or maybe you are this person on certain evenings, who is genuinely disciplined in almost every visible area of life. Organized at work, thoughtful in relationships, careful, even meticulous in most decisions, and yet, there's this one corner of life, this one specific financial behavior that doesn't match the rest. That seems almost inconsistent with who they are everywhere else. The impulse that arrives on Friday nights, the avoidance that shows up whenever a certain kind of financial conversation needs to happen, the generosity that flows outward in every direction except inward, toward their own future. It's not contradiction, it's information. That inconsistency is pointing at something. Some older agreement with themselves about what they deserve, or what's safe to want, or what kind of person handles money well, and whether they privately believe they're that kind of person or not. Because belief is quiet, and belief shapes behavior before behavior shapes outcomes. You can follow every rule correctly and still sabotage the result if somewhere underneath, a quiet, unexamined part of you doesn't fully believe the result belongs to you. That's the layer most financial conversations never reach. They stay at the surface. The tactics, the percentages, the practical mechanics of moving money from one place to another. All of which matters, none of which is the whole story. The whole story lives in the emotional logic running beneath it, in the identity, in the private, rarely spoken narrative a person carries about what their financial life is allowed to look like. And those narratives, quiet, stubborn, astonishingly persistent, don't change because someone explained compound interest clearly. They change when something shifts at the level where they actually live, not at the level of information, at the level of identity. At the quiet interior place where a person decides, not dramatically, not with a declaration, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, that they are no longer willing to keep confirming the old story. And that shift is strange, because it rarely feels like a shift when it's happening. It doesn't arrive with clarity and momentum and the clean, cinematic energy of a turning point. It arrives more like a Tuesday, unremarkable, a little tired. Somewhere between the ordinary demands of the day, and something in you just decides, without fanfare, without an audience, to do the slightly harder thing instead of the comfortable one. That's it. That's the whole moment. And it doesn't feel significant. It feels almost embarrassingly small, which is exactly why most people miss it, or worse, dismiss it. Because we've been quietly taught to wait for the big moment, the rock bottom, the wake-up call, the dramatic, undeniable event that finally forces change. But real behavioral change almost never works that way.
It works in the opposite direction entirely. It works in the accumulation of small, quiet, almost invisible decisions that slowly, so slowly you can barely track it, begin to rewrite the pattern. One honest conversation with yourself instead of an avoidance. One purchase paused long enough to ask whether it's solving something real or just smoothing over something uncomfortable. 1 month where you looked at the numbers directly without flinching away after 2 minutes, without closing the tab and deciding you'll feel more ready next week. None of those moments feel like progress while they're happening. They feel like maintenance, like discipline without reward, like doing a thing correctly and receiving in return absolutely nothing. No applause, no visible result, no confirmation that any of it is working. And that gap between the changed behavior and the visible outcome is where most people quietly give up. Not dramatically, they don't quit with a declaration, they just drift back toward familiar, back toward the pattern that at least has the comfort of being known, even if it isn't working. Because discomfort without immediate feedback is genuinely hard for the human mind to sustain. We are wired for response, for signal, for the small neurological confirmation that effort led somewhere. And financial change, almost by design, withholds that confirmation for longer than feels fair. The saving that doesn't yet feel like security. The restraint that doesn't yet feel like wealth. The patience that just feels like waiting, with nothing to show for it yet. Except the quiet, private knowledge that you're no longer moving in the wrong direction. That knowledge is smaller than it deserves to be. It doesn't photograph well. It doesn't make for a satisfying update to share with anyone. But it is, underneath all of it, the thing that actually matters most in the early stages of changing a financial pattern. Because the mirror doesn't update immediately. It updates slowly. The way light changes in a room. Not all at once, not with a switch, but gradually, as the source of the light itself begins to move. You change the behavior, and the reflection follows, not right away, not on a schedule that feels respectful of the effort involved, but it follows, it always follows. The question that quietly remains, and it's worth sitting with honestly, is not whether change is possible. It's whether you're willing to change before the evidence arrives, and that, right there, is perhaps the most honest, most demanding thing about this entire conversation. Because everything up to this point has been relatively easy to agree with. The patterns, the mirror, the emotional logic running beneath every decision. Yes, that makes sense, that resonates, that feels true. But agreeing with something and living differently because of it are still two separate things. And the distance between them is not filled with information. It's filled with time, with repetition, with the willingness to keep choosing the slightly harder, slightly less immediately satisfying thing on an ordinary day, in an ordinary moment, with no particular reason to believe it's working yet. That's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Not the strategy, the endurance, the quiet, unglamorous, deeply personal endurance of someone who has decided, in that unremarkable Tuesday kind of way, that the old pattern no longer gets to write the ending. And what does that actually look like in real life on a real day? It looks like pausing before a decision that used to be automatic. Not forever, just long enough for something conscious to catch up with something instinctive. That half second of space, the one that used to close before awareness could arrive, staying open just a moment longer. It looks like tolerating the discomfort of not knowing exactly where you stand financially while still choosing to look anyway. Not because looking feels good, because looking is the beginning of directing. It looks like adjusting your time horizon, just slightly, just enough, so that the version of you 5 years from now has a small seat at the table when today's decisions are being made. Not the only seat, just a seat. These aren't dramatic transformations. They don't look like anything from the outside, but from the inside, from the place where patterns actually live, they are everything. And slowly, across all of this, the mirror analogy, the behavioral loops, the emotional logic, the identity underneath the habit, the patience before the proof, what begins to emerge is a picture that's larger than money. It's a picture of how a person relates to themselves. Because the way you handle money is, in the end, a very honest record of what you actually believe about the future, whether you trust it, whether you feel entitled to participate in it, whether the version of you that exists 10 years from now feels real enough to sacrifice something for today. And the way you change your financial life is, in the end, a very honest act of self-respect. Not discipline for discipline's sake, not restriction as punishment, but the quiet, deliberate decision to stop spending your future on the relief of your present and to start behaving one small moment at a time like someone who believes the future is real and worth arriving to. That's what the mirror eventually shows when the behavior shifts. Not a perfect financial life, not a number, not a destination, just a person who stopped waiting for external circumstances to change and started, quietly and imperfectly, changing the only thing they ever actually had control over: themselves. If any part of this conversation touched something real for you, a pattern you recognized, a thought you'd been carrying quietly, share it in the comments. Not because anyone has the perfect answer, but because sometimes just naming the thing out loud is where it begins. And if this felt worth your time, a like and a subscription means this kind of conversation keeps going. Thank you for listening.